When I was 24, I moved into my first solo apartment, a renovated basement unit in an older home in Pittsburgh. The landlord, Mr. Davison, lived upstairs with his wife. They were in their late 60s, quiet people who kept to themselves. The rent was incredibly affordable for the area, which should have been my first red flag, but I was fresh out of grad school and drowning in student loans. The apartment itself was spacious: one large bedroom, a full bathroom, a decent-sized living area, and a kitchenette tucked in the corner. The only quirk was a locked door in the hallway that Mr. Davison said led to the utility room and storage space. He told me he kept it locked because it was cluttered and potentially dangerous, with exposed wiring and old paint cans. Fair enough. I had plenty of space and didn't need access to some dusty storage area. I moved in on a Saturday in October. My friends helped me carry boxes down the exterior entrance, a separate doorway that led directly to my apartment, which I loved because it meant I rarely had to interact with my landlords. By evening, I was exhausted but excited, ordering pizza and setting up my TV to christen the new place properly. The first week was perfect. I fell asleep easily in the quiet basement, insulated from street noise. I established a routine: wake up, coffee, work from home at my little desk, evening run, dinner, Netflix, sleep. The Davidsons were model landlords, never bothering me, always responsive when I texted about minor issues. Then, exactly 9 days after I moved in, I started hearing the sounds. It was a Thursday night, around 11 p.m. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it, a muffled thump coming from somewhere in the apartment. I sat up, listening. Another thump, followed by what sounded like dragging. My first thought was the Davisons moving furniture upstairs, but the sound wasn't coming from above me. It was coming from beside me, from behind that locked storage door. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The door was still locked, just as it always was. I pressed my ear against it and listened. Nothing, just silence. I stood there for maybe 3 minutes, feeling foolish, before going back to bed. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 11 p.m., same sounds. This time, I was certain something was moving behind that door. I texted Mr. Davison, "Hey, just wondering if you're doing any maintenance in the storage area. Hearing some noises at night." He responded within minutes. "No maintenance scheduled. Might be the pipes expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Old house quirks. Let me know if it continues." But it wasn't pipes. I knew what pipes sounded like. This was rhythmic, purposeful movement. On Saturday, I decided to investigate during daylight. I knocked on the Davisons' door upstairs, planning to ask for access to the storage room, but no one answered. Their car was gone, probably out running errands. I went back downstairs, frustrated, and stood in front of that locked door for a long time. That's when I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. The gap at the bottom of the door, about half an inch of space between the door and the floor. And in that gap, I saw light. Not much, just a faint glow, as if someone had left a light on in there. My heart started beating faster. Why would there be a light on in a storage room? I got down on my hands and knees, pressing my face close to the floor, trying to see through the gap. The angle was wrong, and all I could make out was concrete floor and what looked like the leg of a table or shelf. Then the light went out. I jerked back, my pulse racing. Someone had just turned off that light. Someone was in there right now, and they knew I was looking. I scrambled to my feet and backed away from the door. My phone was in my bedroom. I grabbed it and called Mr. Davison. Hello? He sounded slightly out of breath, like he'd been carrying something heavy. Mr. Davison, there's someone in the storage room. I saw a light and it just turned off. Someone's in there. What? No, that's impossible. That room is locked, and I have the only key. I'm telling you, there's someone in there. Can you please come check it out? He sighed, but agreed to come down. 5 minutes later, I heard his heavy footsteps on my stairs. He let himself in with his master key, carrying a flashlight. Let's take a look, he said, pulling out a key ring with at least 20 keys on it. He sorted through them, selected one, and unlocked the storage door. It swung inward with a creak. He shone his flashlight inside, and I peered around his broad shoulders. It was just a storage room. Concrete walls, metal shelving units stacked with boxes, old paint cans, a water heater in the back corner, exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Cluttered and dusty, exactly as he'd described. See, Mr. Davison said, nothing here. That light you saw was probably just reflection from something. Maybe a car's headlights coming through one of the small windows. I looked at the windows. 2 narrow rectangles near the ceiling, both completely covered in grime and partially blocked by boxes. No way was light coming through those. I know what I saw, I said quietly. I believe you saw something, he said, in that patronizing tone people use when they think you're being hysterical. But there's no one here. The room's been locked the whole time. You're probably just adjusting to new space anxiety. My wife had it when we first moved here. Strange noises everywhere, convinced someone was in the walls. It passed after a few weeks. He locked the door again and left, telling me to call if I had any other concerns. I stood in my hallway, staring at that door, feeling dismissed and foolish. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just jumpy in a new place. But that night, at 11 p.m., I heard it again. The thumping, the dragging, and something new, a cough, a human cough, muffled but unmistakable, coming from behind that door. I didn't call Mr. Davidson. I called 911. The operator was patient, taking down my information, but I could hear the skepticism in her voice. And your landlord has checked this room already? Yes, but I'm telling you, someone is in there now. I can hear them. Okay, we'll send an officer to do a wellness check. 2 cops arrived 20 minutes later, a male officer in his 40s and a young female officer who couldn't have been more than 25. I explained the situation, played them a voice recording I'd made on my phone where you could faintly hear the thumping sounds. Have you been feeling stressed lately? New job, new place, anything like that? I wanted to scream. I'm not imagining this. Please, just check the room. They called Mr. Davidson, who came down again, now visibly annoyed. He unlocked the door, and the officers searched the storage room with their flashlights. Again, nothing, just boxes and pipes and dust. Ma'am, the female officer said gently, there's no one here. If you continue to hear concerning noises, you might want to consider if you're experiencing anxiety or... I'm not crazy, the male officer said. No one's saying you are, but there's nothing here we can help with. If the situation changes, you can call again. They left. Mr. Davidson left, and I stood alone in my apartment, humiliated and terrified. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with a kitchen knife in my lap, listening. At 11 p.m., the sounds started again, but this time I didn't call anyone. I just listened and waited for morning. At 7 a.m., I heard the Davisons' car start and drive away. I waited 15 minutes to make sure they were really gone. Then I did something I knew was wrong but felt absolutely necessary. I tried to break into the storage room. The lock was old and simple. I'd watched enough YouTube videos in my sleepless night to know the basics of lockpicking. Using a bobby pin and a flathead screwdriver, I worked at it for nearly 40 minutes before I heard the satisfying click. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open. The storage room looked exactly the same as before. Shelves, boxes, paint cans, water heater. But I stepped inside anyway, pulling the door partially closed behind me, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light from those grimy windows. I started checking behind the shelving units, moving boxes, and that's when I found it, hidden in the back corner behind the water heater and a tall shelf that created a small alcove.
A mattress. And on that mattress, a person. I stumbled backward, hitting a shelf, sending a paint can clattering to the floor. The person stirred. A young woman, maybe 20 years old, with matted blonde hair and terrified eyes. She was chained to a pipe, a thick metal chain attached to a cuff around her ankle. We stared at each other for one endless moment. Then she whispered, "Please help me." I ran, not away from her, but out of the apartment, up the stairs, pounding on the Davidsons' door even though I knew they were gone. I called 911, screaming into the phone that I'd found someone. Someone was being held prisoner. They needed to send everyone now. The response was immediate. Within 10 minutes, my quiet street was swarming with police cars. I led officers into the storage room, and I watched as they freed that girl, wrapped her in blankets, called for an ambulance. Her name was Jessica. She'd been missing for 7 months. The Davidsons had snatched her from a grocery store parking lot. Mr. Davidson was arrested at his office where he worked as an accountant. Mrs. Davidson was arrested at a coffee shop where she was having breakfast with friends. They'd been keeping Jessica in that storage room the entire time, soundproofing it as much as possible, keeping her chained and quiet. They'd rented out the basement apartment multiple times over the years. I was just the first tenant who'd actually noticed something was wrong.
The detective told me later that most of the sounds I'd heard weren't Jessica trying to escape or call for help. They were the Davidsons, going in and out, bringing her food, keeping her compliant. The cough I'd heard was real. She had pneumonia from the damp, cold conditions. A few more weeks and she might not have survived. I moved out that day. Stayed with friends, eventually found a new place. Jessica recovered physically, though I can't imagine what her psychological recovery looks like. The Davidsons are awaiting trial, facing multiple charges including kidnapping, false imprisonment, and attempted murder. I still think about those first nights when I heard the sounds and doubted myself. I think about how close I came to just accepting Mr. Davidson's explanations, convincing myself I was imagining things. I think about all those previous tenants who did dismiss the sounds, who moved out because something felt wrong, but never investigated far enough. And I think about this. When Mr. Davison showed me the storage room that first time, Jessica was in there, hiding behind that water heater, chained and terrified, probably listening to us talk about whether she existed. She was there the whole time, and I almost didn't trust myself enough to find her. I never knew my neighbor's name, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I moved into my townhouse in suburban Seattle in late March. It was a quiet community, mostly young professionals and small families. My unit was an end unit, which I loved. Only one shared wall and a small fenced yard that backed up to a wooded area. Perfect for my dog, Biscuit, a golden retriever mix I'd adopted 6 months earlier. The neighbor I shared a wall with was a middle-aged man who I rarely saw. He worked odd hours, I think, because his car would be gone during the day, but home late at night. The few times I'd seen him, he'd given me a polite nod but never engaged in conversation. I liked that. I wasn't looking for best friends, just peaceful coexistence. Everything was fine for the first month. I'd get home from work around 6 p.m., take Biscuit for a walk, make dinner, and settle in for the evening. My routine was predictable and comfortable. Then, in late April, I started noticing him. Not my neighbor, a different man. He'd stand at the edge of the woods behind my yard, partially obscured by trees, just standing there. The first time I saw him was on a Saturday afternoon. I was letting Biscuit out in the backyard when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I looked up and saw him. Tall, wearing a dark hoodie despite the mild weather, hands in his pockets, standing about 30 yards back in the trees. He was looking at my house. At me. I stared back, unsettled but not yet frightened. Maybe he was just a hiker who'd stopped to rest. The woods connected to a small trail system, but he didn't have a backpack or any hiking gear, and he was standing perfectly still, not resting at all, just watching. I called Biscuit back inside and glanced out again. The man was gone. I saw him again 2 days later, same spot, same stance, same watchful stillness. This time when I looked at him, he raised one hand and waved. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was slow, deliberate, and somehow mocking, like he wanted me to know he was there, wanted me to see him seeing me. I closed the blinds and didn't let Biscuit out in the yard that evening. I took him for a walk out front instead, looking over my shoulder the entire time. The next day, I mentioned it to my coworker Dana, who'd lived in Seattle for years. There's a guy who keeps standing in the woods behind my place, just watching. It's really creeping me out. Have you called the police? She asked immediately. And tell them what? A man is standing in public woods, not technically on my property, not doing anything illegal. He's watching your house, Mara. That's stalking behavior. You should at least report it so there's a record. She was right. After work, I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The dispatcher was professional but non-committal. We can have an officer do extra patrols in your area, but if he's not on your property or making threats, there's not much we can do. Can't you go talk to him? Ask him why he's standing there? We'd need to identify him first, ma'am, but we'll make note of your concerns. That night, I kept every blind closed. Biscuit seemed restless, pacing between the back door and the living room, whining softly. Dogs know when something's wrong. At 11:30 p.m., I was brushing my teeth when Biscuit started barking. Deep, aggressive barks I'd never heard him before. I ran to the living room and found him at the back sliding door, hackles raised, barking at something outside. I should have stayed inside. I should have called 911 immediately. But instead, I grabbed my phone, turned on the backyard light, and looked out. The waving man was standing in my yard, right up against the fence, no longer hiding in the trees. The backlight illuminated his face for the first time. He was younger than I'd thought, maybe early 30s, with a scraggly beard and intense dark eyes. And he was still waving at me, that same slow, mocking wave. I screamed and stumbled backward, fumbling with my phone to call 911. By the time I looked outside again, he was gone. The police came this time, a young officer who took my statement and walked around my property with a flashlight. He didn't find anyone, but he did find footprints in the soft mud near my back fence. Definitely someone was here, he confirmed. We'll increase patrols, and I'd recommend getting some security cameras installed. Have you had any other interactions with this individual? I told him about the previous sightings. He wrote everything down, gave me a case number, and told me to call immediately if the man returned. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. Biscuit stayed alert too, occasionally growling at the back door. The next morning,
Exhausted and frightened, I decided to take Dana's advice seriously. I called a security company and scheduled an installation for later that week. I also went to a hardware store and bought motion sensor lights for the backyard. But the waving man was done being subtle. That evening, as I was pulling into my driveway after work, I saw him. He was standing in front of my townhouse, on the sidewalk, in full view. Not hiding, not lurking, just standing there, staring at my front door. I didn't get out of my car. I locked the doors and called 911 from my driver's seat, watching him the entire time. He didn't move, didn't run. He just stood there, and for a moment, he waved.
The dispatcher told me to stay in my car, that officers were on the way. I watched him, and he watched me, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. When he heard the sirens approaching, he finally moved, not running away, but walking calmly around the corner as if he'd just finished an ordinary errand. The police searched the area, but didn't find him. One of the officers, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, sat with me in my living room afterward. "This is stalking," she said firmly. "The pattern is clear. We're going to assign your case to a detective who specializes in stalking cases. In the meantime, I want you to document everything. Every time you see him, take a photo if you can. Write down the date and time. Don't interact with him, don't confront him, and consider staying somewhere else for a few days." "This is my home," I said, but my voice cracked. "Why should I have to leave?" "You shouldn't," she agreed, "but your safety is more important than principle." I stayed with Dana that night and the next, but I couldn't stay away from my own home forever. On the third day, I went back, armed with pepper spray and a baseball bat, with Biscuit by my side. The security company installed cameras the next day. One on the front door, one on the back door, one overlooking the yard. I could monitor them from my phone, and they recorded continuously. For 3 days, nothing happened. No sightings of the waving man, no movement in the woods. I started to relax, thinking maybe the police presence had scared him off. Then, on the 4th night, at 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert from the back door camera. Motion detected. Half asleep, I opened the app, expecting to see a raccoon or a cat. Instead, I saw him. The waving man, standing directly in front of my back door, face inches from the camera, staring into the lens, and yes, waving. I screamed and called 911. By the time the police arrived 10 minutes later, he was gone again. But I had him on video now, clear footage of his face, his clothing, his deliberate harassment. The detective assigned to my case, Detective Reeves, came by the next morning to review the footage. "This is good," he said. "Really good. We can distribute this to patrol officers. Someone will recognize him." "How is he always gone before you get here?" I asked, frustrated and exhausted. It's like he knows exactly how much time he has. Detective Reeves frowned. "He might be monitoring police scanners. Some stalkers do. We'll take that into account." 2 days later, Detective Reeves called me. "We've identified your stalker. His name is Marcus Webb. He has a record, 2 previous stalking charges. Both resulted in restraining orders. He served a year in jail after violating one of them." "Do you know where he is?" "Not yet. We've got officers checking his last known address and places he's known to frequent. We'll bring him in for questioning." "And then what? Another restraining order he'll just violate?" "We're pushing for more serious charges this time, given his history. But Mara, I need you to be extremely careful. When we bring him in, he'll know you are the one who reported him. Stalkers often escalate when they feel cornered."
That night, I didn't stay at home. I packed a bag and went to Dana's again, bringing Biscuit with me. I felt like a refugee from my own life. Marcus Webb was arrested the next afternoon at a friend's apartment. Detective Reeves called to tell me, and I felt a wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy. "We've charged him with stalking and criminal trespass," the detective said. "Given his record, the DA is taking this seriously. He's being held on $50,000 bail." "So, it's over?" "For now. We'll be requesting a no-contact order, and there'll be a hearing, but yes, he's off the streets for the moment." I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I thanked the universe, thanked the police, thanked my security cameras. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. 3 days later, Marcus Webb posted bail. Someone, a family member or friend, had paid it. Detective Reeves called to warn me, his voice tense. "He's out. The no-contact order is in place, but I want you to be vigilant. If you see him anywhere near your property, call 911 immediately." That night, at 11:15 p.m., my back door camera alert went off. Marcus Webb was in my yard again, but this time, he wasn't just standing there. He was trying the back door handle, pulling on it, pushing against it. I called 911 from my bedroom, whispering frantically, "He's here. He's trying to get in. Marcus Webb. He's at my back door right now." "Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are on the way." I could hear him now, without the camera. The sound of him jiggling the door handle, then moving to the window, trying to pry it open. Biscuit was going insane, barking and snarling. I grabbed the baseball bat and locked myself in my bedroom, pushing my dresser against the door. The sounds continued. Window after window, he was testing them all, trying to find a way in. And then I heard it. The sound of breaking glass. The small bathroom window, the one I'd forgotten to check, the one that didn't have a security sensor. He was inside my house. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway, hear Biscuit's frantic barking, hear the 911 operator on my phone telling me to stay calm. Police were 60 seconds away. Marcus Webb tried my bedroom door. The handle turned, but the dresser held. "Mara," he called through the door. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I just want to talk to you. I just want to be your friend. Why won't you let me be your friend?" I didn't answer. I stood there with the baseball bat raised, tears streaming down my face, listening to him try to force the door open. Then I heard the sirens. Marcus must have heard them too, because the pressure on my door stopped. I heard his footsteps running back down the hall, heard the sound of the front door being flung open, heard shouting, "Police! Get on the ground!" It was over in seconds. They tackled him in my front yard. Marcus Webb was charged with burglary, stalking, and violating a protective order. This time, there was no bail. He's currently serving a 6-year sentence. I sold the townhouse. I couldn't live there anymore. Couldn't walk into that hallway without remembering the sound of his voice through my bedroom door. I moved across the city to a high-rise apartment building with 24-hour security and cameras everywhere. I never learned why Marcus Webb chose me. Detective Reeves said stalkers often pick targets randomly. Something about you catches their attention and they become obsessed. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face. I've had therapy. I've worked through the trauma. But I still sleep with lights on. Still check cameras obsessively. Still feel my heart race when I see someone standing still for too long. And I never, ever wave back.